That's what I really respect about Georgia. Jim Harbaugh said their ability to run the ball when the other team knows they're going to run, and the ability to stop it. Talking about stopping the run. That was Jim Harbaugh to Pat Forty at at Big Ten Media Days. I want to talk about that. Hey, listen, make sure you're sticking to. I've got an offer for y'all coming up at about the 3-minute mark for stuff like this. You think Jim Harbaugh's right? I mean, right now we're talking about a program that's probably the second best program in the country. They just have not played for the national championship yet. A program that's lost, I think it's 3 games in 2 years, one of them to Georgia, none of them to Ohio State. A program that probably won't have its head coach in September because of NCAA violations. Like, that's really hard to accomplish these days, is getting the NCAA onto you. But Tennessee, well, specifically Jeremy Pruitt and Jim Harbaugh managed to do both of those things at once. But I just wanted to say that's what I really respect about that team. Talking about Georgia, Harbaugh said. And they've got, I've already talked about this beat Georgia period. And, sometimes I think if you concentrate too much on any one thing, I don't know. I don't come from that school. And, in college, we never really had a major rival, like a direct rival. We did in high school, but you don't want to focus on that one team. You need to focus on yourself and focus on what you got to do, because Georgia may or may not be in Michigan's way over time. But they instituted a beat Ohio State period, and that's worked for them. I get it. But his point here, globally speaking, about how Georgia's ability to run the ball when the other teams knows they're going to run it, and their ability to stop the run, that happens consistently at Georgia. I think that they are, maybe more apt to just move the ball. It doesn't have to be with the run. But I can't tell you how many times I watched Georgia in the Kirby Smart era, for sure, need to run the ball and then ran it. I mean, Missouri last year at the end of the game, any Auburn game in the second half lately, Georgia Tech. I was going to say Ohio State, but that's not true. They had to throw it, and they did. The run from the Dawgs, that's always, if you're good at football, you can run. You can run the ball. And that's what Jim Harbaugh wants his team to be. Now, they're not as gifted as Georgia. They're not as talented. But they're certainly hanging in there. Now, here's what I got for everybody watching. It's that time of the year. It's practice starts Monday at Georgia. So we've got a special for you. If you sign up for Dog Post today, the $15 a month fee that we've got, you're going to get our 2023 preview included free. We're going to mail it to you. You're going to get 20% off any item at Red Zone. Doesn't matter the item. Any item, you're getting a 20% off code that you can use for the what are they called? Horrible Christmas t-shirts, the Vince Dooley hat from back in the day. And they're going to send you a Red Zone t-shirt free. That's a lot of free. In addition, if you've bought Double Dogs or you've bought the preview, just sign up. I've already done this for a lot of people. You're going to get September free. So take advantage of that. The link is right down below, and get on it. This is a very nice sweatshirt, but it is warm in the summer in Georgia. They confirmed, Michigan confirmed it wasn't just Harbaugh that's let this slip out. It was also a defensive back basically confirming that is true. And Georgia, I've never heard of Kirby and them doing this. I do know, I'll tell you this story real quick. And I think this was necessary for a very different reason. In 2009, Georgia was coming into the season with Joe Cox as their quarterback. He's the Alabama tight ends coach now. AJ Green, they had some, issues on the defensive side of the ball coming back. Willie Martinez was the defensive coordinator. And, they had Matthew Stafford, AJ Green, etc., and Sean Moreno this season before they started the season number 1 in the country. They lost to Georgia Tech on the final game of the season. They lost 45 to 42, I think the score was. They were on the way to beating Georgia Tech, and just chaos began at the beginning of the second half. And from that point forward, after the Georgia Tech game in 2008, Georgia, every single practice, from what I understand, or at least every single week, had at least a period of time where they dealt with dealing with the option. And that work paid off. So in 9, 10, 11, 12, they ripped through Georgia Tech, and 13, they ripped through Georgia Tech, stopped them, did what they needed to do, won all those games in a row. New defensive coordinator comes in 2024. His name is Jeremy Pruitt. He will not listen to anything. And although, Georgia knew what they were doing in terms of how close to the line to be defensively and how, where everybody was supposed to be and how to deal with Paul Johnson's option. That was a pretty good, first of all, that was a pretty good Georgia Tech team, number one. And number two, there's no, you just can't reason with Jeremy. So he knew what he was talking about. And, the defense played okay. If you think about it, I mean, they allowed, what was it, what was the final score, 26-20, something like that. But they lost. And a season later, Georgia goes on to win. And then in year one for Kirby and Georgia, they lose to Georgia Tech in that option. And they damn sure did not lose after that. So there is merit in preparing for a team, particularly like what I just described. I don't know. I was going to say, I don't know how you prepare for Georgia. But I will say this. Preparing for Georgia is a 364-day-a-year job. I'll give you Christmas. But all those other days, the preparing is the development of a program over time. That includes recruiting, development, which under development is strength, nutrition or lack thereof in some cases, class development, all of that stuff, all of it. And then going out and executing on game days, executing in recruiting. You are not going to scheme your way to beating Georgia. It's not going to happen. I mean, you have to have players. And if you don't have players and if you don't develop them, you're not going to get the job done. It won't happen. Michigan is one of the few teams that can do that. Michigan is one of the few teams in college football who can fight with Georgia. I mean, if you go back and watch that Orange Bowl, everybody was like, oh, man, Georgia. Yeah, I mean, that game was a little closer than it seemed at times. I mean, Michigan doesn't get that fourth down. They were driving deep. It was relatively deep in the Georgia territory. I think they were between the 30 and the 40, whatever it was, and they went for it. Didn't get it. Georgia comes down, scores a touchdown. The next drive, I can't remember, but didn't happen. I believe Georgia scored a touchdown right after that again, and the game kind of got away from Michigan quicker than you would like. Now, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, they kind of got their ass whipped a little bit, but I'm just saying, they didn't just roll over and die. I mean, it took Georgia a little bit of effort. Michigan just didn't. The problem for Michigan was when they needed to get back into the game, they couldn't because Georgia was doing exactly what Jim Harbaugh was worried about, which is they just came down and started running the ball, killing the clock. Michigan couldn't stop them. It was not the second drive. I believe it was. Well, let me be sure here. Yeah, no, it was Georgia's second drive. And then, once you get down 17-0 in the first quarter, it's tough. It's tough. And, their first drive, Michigan was 7 plays, 34 yards. And then they went, Georgia scores a touchdown. And then Michigan gets a first down, but then goes backwards. They go 6 plays for 3 yards, kick it away to Georgia, touchdown. And they're down, before you know it, they're down 17-0. And it was, by the time Michigan scored with what I would say was a nice drive, it was 7 plays, 34 yards. I misspoke. I said that, I may not have misspoken, but Georgia took the ball down the field and scored. And so Michigan then got the ball and drove it to the Georgia 41 and then got stopped on a fourth down play. But, I don't know that Georgia is 23 points better than Michigan. They might be 12 points better than Michigan. I think the problem for Michigan, generally speaking, and sort of this approach is, and it's okay. I mean, it's going to happen. When you name your target, people are going to give you grief about A, not hitting your target, which is beating Georgia, and then B, what happened with TCU last year. I mean, there was Michigan as a pretty significant favorite, and they lose a game that they just shouldn't have lost. And I say they shouldn't have lost, but I don't really know what to say about it. I mean, you got a shot there to win the national championship, or at least play for the national championship, and you lose. Now they were a 7.5 point favorite, so I mean that you should win that game. You should win that game, and then just to get run up and down the field on 51 points. TCU, I think, was a perfectly adequate team. This was not, this was not a great team. But Michigan couldn't beat Ohio State. Michigan couldn't beat TCU, and Ohio State couldn't beat Michigan, and none of them could beat the Dogs. And that's going to be the question moving forward is, can you take a period of practice and get where you got to go? Or is it just a mindset thing? Because that may just be what it is too.